Hi there, Dorothy. I'm just going to obviously run through this survey. When there's a point of interest, I've highlighted it in yellow, and otherwise it's just a lot of verbiage, I suppose, or background information. As you will see from this report, you get a lot of supplemental content, let's say. Anyhow, he seems fairly happy with this, saying that it would resell fairly easily and that the £160,000 purchase price was about right. And I'm glad. Now, he also says that there are a lot of elements which need attention. And with these survey reports, because the surveyor is generally quite, let's say, they're quite risk averse, they tend to say if they don't know or if there's no certificate or whatever, they'll assume that something is a serious problem, or at least they say it is in this. But that isn't necessarily the case. For example, electricity meters. It might be a brand new electricity meter that was only installed yesterday, but if he doesn't see the safety certificates and what have you, then he would say it was category 3 and a danger. He's saying they're cavity walls and cavity to the front and solid to the back, and then timber floor. Yeah. Now it's specified as EPC D, which is actually reasonably good. And I suppose upon a, a full renovation, you could probably get up to EPC C. That would be thermostatic controllers on the um, on the radiators, a modern boiler, and evidence that the loft is insulated. Now, let's have a look. Blocked paving to the front. So I'm not good. I'm just kind of leafing through the things that aren't that critical. Right, here we go. Now, one thing that I'm pleased about is that the chimney stacks are upright and in good condition or reasonably good condition. That's obviously not a tree growing out of the stack. But anyway, this is all good. And this also highlights another interesting point about this property. Just reading through the survey in general, it seems like the property had a very thorough renovation at some point in its life, maybe 40 years ago or something like that. And you'll see some more evidence for that a little later on. Anyhow, that's good about the chimney stack. Next thing is he's saying some tiles need a bit of work. So this is a case of getting a roofer up there just to do the tingles. So tingling a roof is this, and roof tingles sounds like a weird name, doesn't it? But anyway, a roof tingle, there's a roof tingle for you. Essentially, the issue with slate roofs are that if a nail pops out, you can't slot it back in as such. You actually have to you have to at some point you have to just redo the whole slate roof. So you're kind of hoping the roof doesn't slip, or loads of slates don't come off. But anyway, what you do is you take the slate out and you bang a nail in there between the two other slates so then you bang this strip of aluminium in. It's a long strip, and you kind of roll it up and then push it back like that. And it could be copper as well, copper or aluminium. But that's roof tingling, and it's just one of those things that you get with slate tiles. Anyway, it doesn't mean the roof needs replacing. It's just like it's a thing. Anyway, moving on. So then he talks about flashing and all of that, and some background content about roofing and such. Then we're looking at the roof for the extension, and that looks like it's in reasonably good condition. The fascia board is in reasonably good condition, oddly enough. And then if we look at the fascia board here, that's also in reasonably good condition. Then if we go here, there's that back roof, and there's a bit of wood knocking around, but overall it's fundamentally okay. It's not like it's falling apart and ready to collapse. One of the things that did kind of not surprise me, but I was concerned about, was whether there'd be an issue with this brickwork. Because in theory, either that wall is vertical or that wall is vertical, but they both can't be vertical because there's effectively a vertical gap between the two houses. But anyway, he hasn't mentioned any of that, which is encouraging. On the rear of the property, you can see some of the guttering has failed, and you can see water kind of draining down here. So this is an issue and needs to be sorted out, but it's not a problem. It's just gutters and such. So it's quite a straightforward thing to do. Fascia board needs doing, as we know. And then he talks about the main walls being upright and of cavity construction and so on. So this is really good. But he says he hasn't seen any injections on the walls, and what he's talking about is the cavity wall insulation. In a way, that's also a good thing, because if you had this done many years ago, it could have rotted the wall ties and allowed for moisture to build up. Essentially, early cavity wall insulation, as I understand it, wasn't breathable. So the air gap between the two walls, if I can find a diagram, the air gap between the two walls, if you can imagine, just got blocked up, and then you'd get moisture building up, and that would lead to all sorts of issues. But modern insulation material is breathable, and therefore, if you do it this time round, then that's a good thing. You won't have long-term issues with it, and it'll help with the EPC stuff if that's something you're concerned about with EPC regulations. And moving on, now this is quite interesting. So on the back of the house, they're saying that there was probably damp-proof course work. So this injection of damp-proof course, essentially, if you imagine you drill where am I? Let's just do this. DPC injection, damp. There we go. Let's find a picture of that. And essentially it's this stuff that you put into walls, and then the goop kind of spreads from, that's not a great picture. The goop spreads laterally across the bricks and then creates a waterproof membrane that prevents moisture coming through. And here's a picture of some DPC work being done. So you inject it, and then the moisture, then the goop kind of goes left and right. Anyway, the point is, he's saying he sees it on the back of the house, but not on the front of the house. And he also noticed some damp, where am I? Sorry, I'm just kind of losing my track here a little bit. Yes, anyway, he noticed some damp around the house, but nothing too serious. But we need to look at that. We'll look at that a little later. And what else he's saying? The brickwork seemed to be okay, and I agree. It's good brickwork, actually. So it's a relatively well-built house. And we can see here that there's evidence of a basement, which is also interesting. So this property has lots of what I call bonus space, which we'll see shortly. And you've read through this obviously, so you know. Uh, and uh, Overall, this brickwork is good. So in the front of the property, you have the fancy brickwork, then you have the secondary or secondary quality brickwork at the rear. But one thing I've noticed is that it's got a kind of a sheen to it or a shine. And you can see it kind of glazing here. And this is good because it means that when water hits it, it doesn't absorb straight in. It actually kind of runs off the brick wall, which is good. And here are some diagrams about cavities and so on. Now, the next thing is he's talking about UPVC windows. Generally speaking, they're always marked as 3 because he won't have the certificates for guaranteeing them. These are quite old windows actually, and I suspect in the renovation, bearing in mind the property that it is and the position that it's in, you may want to replace the actual windows. Now, I don't know why there's a knife. We talked about this before, I remember. But anyway, there's a knife there, and also he's saying that there's some bad fitting of that window. Then we've got what looks like a more modern window on the rear and various other windows going around. Now, one thing that's interesting is that they don't seem to have blown, i.e. there's no condensation between the two panes of glass, which is good. But presumably in renovating this property, you may well want to just replace all the windows. I'm not sure. Or at least replace the most aged ones. The front door, yes, look at that. That's a rotting door if I ever saw one. And of course, that needs replacing. I wonder if this door has been smashed in. It looks like it might have been. See the crack there? Maybe it has. I don't know. Anyway, let's not start thinking about smashed in doors and knives belonging to murderers. Oh, did I just plant an idea? Whoops. Uh, I assume there aren't any murderers living in this house, or never. Anyway, split door to the rear. Sorry. And that's just, it kind of highlights a point really, that if somebody was going super economy, they wouldn't use the split door. So there has been some investment in this property in the past, and we're going to see some more of these signs, as it were. And yeah, roof structure, this is very important. I honestly didn't know that there was a whole storage space here. And it leads to a question, which is, if you are you will be renovating the property, is it worth decorating or doing this room properly? I.e., are the joists strong enough to take the weight of somebody? Is there enough space for a proper stairs? I don't know. The issue with a loft room is that it needs to meet quite a number of building regulation standards, like, for example, the joists have to be of a certain strength. And usually what that means is you have to run steel beams either lengthwise along the same axis as the roof, and then you fit those on end walls, and then you put the wooden flooring in between the steel beams, and thus you have the strength, and then it's all right. But in the north of England, you get an awful lot of these rooms which are just kind of boarded out and make for extra storage. My feeling is it needs to be investigated, and if the joists are strong enough, then it makes a very helpful storage area. Or potentially, if the headroom is there, then you might be able to have a go at doing a full loft conversion, assuming you can reconfigure the first floor to allow for a proper staircase in with a fire door and so on. We did years ago. I've done a few loft conversions actually, and yeah, when I was a builder. Anyhow, it's just a thing to think about. But I think they obviously felt they wanted the storage space, but they didn't want to go all the way with building it out fully. The big question, of course, is because you're in such a significant area and because space is a premium, is it worth doing this up and building it out fully? And it's a kind of semi-rhetorical question because I don't know the answer and it needs a feasibility study and so on. Anyway, getting back to my theory about this house having a deep, deep renovation, it's got felt here. When this property was built in 1900, they wouldn't have had bitumen felt, which is essentially like a thick fabric with tar in it. And these are and today use a much lighter plastic waterproof membrane that's also breathable. Anyhow, the fact that this has felt in it tells me that this roof was probably replaced maybe 60 years ago. So this felt they started to use this in the 1950s or thereabouts. And that tells me that this place has had a deep, deep renovation, which is great because if it never had this, then you would have more work to do. And you don't have more work to do. So anyway, here he is. He's stuck his pronger thing into this, and he's saying no moisture here. So somewhere there was a leak somewhere at some point. But anyway, and also the other thing to point out is because you've got a felt roof, if there's a slipped slate, the water drains down the roof, the felt roofing stuff, and out it goes. Now he says here that the ceilings appear to be plasterboard, so that's interesting, and that they're in reasonable condition. Again, this highlights a point that when this property was built, they would have used plaster and lath, and plaster and lath looks like this, which is troublesome, i.e. you have wood strips and then you squidge plaster between them and then it dribbles down like this, and that's your fixing. And the problem is that most of the time the wood strips would be pretty cheap and all kind of bent and twisted and what have you. And then the plasterer would try to get the flattest line possible based on their visual, their eye, as it were. And that's never going to be as flat and nice as a machine producing plasterboard. Anyway, he's saying there's lots of plasterboard throughout the house, which means again this property had a back to bricks renovation sometime probably 60 years ago or thereabouts. He's saying some wrinkling in the front bedroom. That could be historic damp, something like that. And here we have some cracks. I'm not concerned about that. They're not structural, nor is he. I mean, if the surveyor saw structural cracks, you'd know about it. Anyway, it's just textured coating, which needs sorting out. And so therefore, because this is plasterboard, I don't think you need to rip out the ceilings or rip out the plaster on the walls. I think it's mostly good. Obviously, one would need to get into a visual inspection to work out which areas are plasterboard and which aren't. But overall, this looks quite promising. Now, a lot of it, I do dislike this textured surface. I think it just cheapens the place, but that can all be scraped off with a steamer, so it's not that difficult to deal with. No structural issues found, and some elevated moisture warnings. Now, with all this kind of stuff, I think overall this property doesn't really have a damp problem, but terraced houses typically are prone to having damp. And I suspect that the So for example, here's an example of something kind of interesting. You've got a heater, and you often get this where wallpaper just peels off here. And I suspect that's just condensation. Now he's saying there's no damp issue here, so that's good news. And I just think that that's heat, cold, i.e. radiators. And I'm not too concerned about damp, the threat of damp here. And we've got some wallpaper that needs to come out. And so far, what I'm seeing is essentially a plaster that's good. So these are solid walls, which is interesting. So he's not saying they're stud walls. You can tell. You just go gadonk, gadonk, gadonk like that, and you can hear it. And if it goes dum, 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 then you know it's wood. And if it's boom, boom, you know, thump, thump. Anyway, the point being, that's good as well. So that's a good flat surface. And there's some signs of damp here. You can see that. So there may need to be, so front wall of front lounge. I think I need to have a look at this. I think he's talking about, so front wall of front lounge would be the wall facing out, I assume, onto the road, I think. And we've got this issue again and again, some moisture, but actually it's kind of borderline, but it's basically okay. A little bit of extra moisture here. So overall, there doesn't seem to be any significant damp problem, although there is some damp, and it's pretty straightforward to deal with. Here it looks like we've got some condensation or some moisture coming down in this kitchen, and this area needs to be redone completely. This property hasn't been lived in for a while. You can see here, when you get spider webs and so on, then it's a thing. And the fact that it's not damp and it's not soggy, as it were, and it's gone through a whole winter, that's encouraging. And the next thing is floorboards. Yes, well, if they're creaking, you know, all the carpet's got to come out anyway, and one would just go through the floor with screws basically and screw down any floorboards which were kind of bouncy. You might even put a thin hardboard on top of that, which is what I would be inclined to do, just to help smoothen out the floor. And then you'd have, so the hardboard, then the underlay, then the carpet. And then I think it would come up nicely. Now on, yeah, so creaking things. Now this is super interesting. This property has, okay, stripped wooden floors. Again, I would not do that. I would put laminate or something over that, honestly, if it was me, just because it's prone to having drafts from up underneath. Ceramic floor probably needs to be replaced. Well, it does. And then we have some stuff about joists, and he's saying the chimney breasts are intact. That's good. Sometimes in houses they strip out the chimney breasts to increase the space, but they forget to leave the chimney in place. And what they do is they leave the chimney in place, and of course that's a lot of weight bearing down, and chimney breast is basically a structural thing. They're intact, that's good. So there's no risk of that chimney collapsing. And the other thing that's interesting as well, you see this kind of coving here. This coving is a very 1960s, more 1970s thing, and you just buy it in strips, and you cut it, get some fixing agent, and then just plonk it in. And again, this point, whenever I do like quick view of a property and I see that coving, and it's a Victorian house, for example, I'm pretty confident that they will have ripped out the old plaster and lath and done the deep renovation. Here we have a vaguely modern gas fire in the front, and this thing, which is 1960s. So it tells me that this property must have been given a thorough renovation in the 60s, because that is a 1960s gas fire, which you just don't get today. And that's interesting. It's good. This property is in much better condition, fundamentally better condition than I thought it would be. Moving on, kitchen needs replacing, obviously, and yeah, I mean, that's just stuff, general deep decoration, but not back to brick, which is a huge thing. It just saves so much hassle. There would need to be some remediation for the damp if you're going to be hacking away at the walls and chipping away plaster. And up here we've got all this. We've got this thing. Essentially, if if it was me renovating, I'd put a modern boiler in. Although cost of energy is going to be expensive, obviously because of the Ukraine situation. But anyway, modern boiler, and then I would have hot water coming off the boiler and not off one of these electric power shower things. Now, this is very interesting. I didn't realize there was a basement. I No, I don't think I remember. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is that there's a basement, and this is good. So it's not full head height, as you know, 1540. And one of the encouraging things is that the timbers all look okay, and it's also interesting that everything's been painted. So that would seal it up, I suppose, and stop moisture getting into the wood itself. So that's a positive thing. Now, he did talk about some kind of flooding in the basement at some point, and let's see, I don't want to dwell upon this too much, but um, there was some no, I seem to remember something about some flooding at some point. But anyway, it's in reasonably good condition, and I would imagine the way you could put waterproofing, damp proofing in this, and there's a new system. There are various ways you can do it anyway. So, all right, this is a very old fuse board, needs replacing, and gas meter looks okay. I don't know if that needs replacing or not. And then you have other things, some piping. Now, what we don't know is whether the piping needs, whether a lot of the pipes need to be replaced. If the electrical system is really old and you put in a modern fuse board, what tends to happen is that the fuses can trip really easily. And in doing that, then you basically have to redo the wiring. I don't know if it needs rewiring, and it's one of those things where once there's a full assessment of the property from a renovation point of view, the electrician can go in, or the builder, if they have the tools, they can go in, do some resistance checks on the wiring, and just see if the wiring is likely to keep tripping a modern fuse board. And we have this old water bottle with a water thing with an immersion heater in it. Again, I suspect the best thing to do with that is just not to have one and have everything running off a boiler. But anyway, right, moving on. And drainage, there's not that much to speak about here. All of that needs reassessing and possibly redoing, I don't know. And then there's some other stuff. Garden needs a bit of a clear out. Everything needs a bit of a clean, a paint, a decorate, just a general freshen up. And there we are. So then he took, there's some legal advice and some other bits and pieces. I'm going to do one more thing because I just remember seeing something, and there was something, and let me try the word flood. Okay, so far so good. Okay, maybe I was wrong. I don't know. All right. So there we are. That is, I'll just make me bigger to conclude. There we go. I've got different screens, you see, and it's all just, anyway. Okay, that was a pleasant surprise. It's good. This thing is shaping up very well, and I think if it's sympathetically decorated, it'll come up very nicely. I think you dodged a bullet, in inverted commas. The fact that that all the plaster and lath is gone, that's like £6,000 of work saved, because a modern property like this needs to have a nice interior. I think if it were me, I would be stripping out all of that textured surface stuff, goop, the Artex surface things. I would strip all of that sort of stuff out. Um, I don't know how much it would cost to do the full renovation. I'm fairly confident I did do an assessment on that, an outline assessment, but I think we need to just start lining Joe up, for example, on getting quotes for a full renovation. I also think it's important for you to have a think about what you'd like to do with the property, i.e., the kind of design, any changes to the floor plan, anything like that that you feel one could make. I will have a look at that as well and comment separately to this. All right, then. Nice one. Thank you.